The night was freezing, the streets empty, and a homeless teen huddled beneath a street lamp, clutching his thin hoodie tighter around his shaking body. He had nothing left, no home, no food, no warmth. He was freezing, starving, and invisible to the world. Just a homeless teen trying to survive one more night. People walked past him every day, never stopping, never asking, never caring. They never even noticed the shivering boy standing alone in the falling snow. But today, he wasn't alone. Draped over his shoulders was an injured German shepherd, bleeding, barely conscious, its police vest torn, its tags muddy and scratched. The boy staggered into a small convenience store, his lips blue from the cold. He had nothing left. No food, no shelter, no family. Just one last crumpled $5 bill, his final lifeline that he reached into his pocket and pulled out his last $5. The only money he had left in the world. The cashier frowned. "Kid, you don't have enough." But the boy didn't back down. "I don't need food," he whispered. "I need help for him." Instead of using it to save himself, he chose to save the dying dog. But this wasn't just any dog. It was a trained canine, injured, struggling to breathe, yet trusting the homeless teen more than anyone else in the world. What the boy didn't know was that this single decision, this one act of pure kindness, would pull him into a story so unbelievable. It would change his entire future forever. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. Snow fell in thick, heavy sheets, turning the city streets into a frozen maze. People hurried past with their coats pulled tight, their breaths visible in the icy air. But none of them noticed the thin teenage boy standing near the alley, wrapped in a torn red hoodie that did nothing to protect him from the cold. His face was pale, his fingers trembling as he rubbed them together for warmth. He had been on the streets for months now, surviving on scraps, sleeping under stairwells, and hoping each morning would hurt a little less than the day before. But winter had a way of swallowing hope whole. Hunger gnawed at his stomach, but he tried to ignore it. What hurt more was the loneliness. How adults crossed the street to avoid him. How no one ever asked if he was okay. He tucked his hands into his hoodie and kept walking, his shoes soaked through with melted snow. The world had forgotten him, and he tried hard not to blame it. But then, through the howling wind, he heard it. A soft, broken whimper coming from the dark alley behind him. A sound of pain. A sound he couldn't ignore. The teen hesitated at the alley entrance, peering into the dim shadows between two brick buildings. The whimper came again, weak, trembling, almost fading. He stepped closer, his breath catching as his eyes adjusted to the darkness. That's when he saw it that a large German shepherd lay collapsed against the cold concrete, its fur matted with snow and blood. The dog tried to lift its head but barely managed a faint growl, more from fear than strength. Its chest rose unevenly, each breath a painful struggle. The teen knelt slowly, palms open, speaking in a soft whisper. "Hey, it's okay. I'm not here to hurt you." The dog's eyes flickered open, sharp, intelligent, but clouded with pain. That's when the teen noticed the torn K9 police vest strapped around its body, one side ripped, the badge barely visible under streaks of dirt. This wasn't just any dog. This was a trained police partner. Someone's protector. Someone's hero. And yet here it was, abandoned, bleeding, freezing. The dog tried to push itself up but collapsed again with a painful whine. Without thinking, the teen shrugged off his backpack and slid his arms under the dog's body. He strained, staggering as the heavy shepherd's weight sank into his shoulders. Cold wind bit at his face, but he tightened his grip. He couldn't leave the dog here, not to die alone in the snow. By the time the teen stumbled out of the alley and into the street, the dog's weight was dragging at his shoulders, each step heavier than the last. Snow clung to the dog's fur and to the boy's hair, melting into cold streaks that ran down his neck. He looked around desperately until he spotted the warm glow of a small convenience store across the road. Pushing the door open with his elbow, he staggered inside. The sudden heat hit him like a wave, but the cashier looked up with suspicion. "Hey kid, what are you doing? Is that dog hurt?" The boy nodded breathlessly. I need help. Please." He set the dog gently against the counter, its head resting on his lap, eyes half closed. The teen reached into his pocket with trembling fingers and pulled out a crumpled $5 bill. the last he had. He held it out with hope and desperation. "I don't need food," he said softly. "Just something to help him." The cashier frowned. $5 won't buy much. And I'm not running a vet clinic. People in line murmured, some irritated, others curious. The boy's heart pounded. He thought the cashier would send him out into the cold, but then the cashier leaned forward, finally noticing the blood-soaked bandage and the torn police vest. His expression changed. "Where did you find him?" The boy swallowed hard. He was alone, and he was dying. The cashier sighed, grabbed a small first aid kit off the shelf, and pushed it across the counter. "Take it, kid. Go help him." The teen hurried outside with the small first aid kit clutched in his numb fingers. Snow swirled around him as he knelt beside the injured dog in the narrow space beside the store. The shepherd shivered, its breath shallow and uneven. "Hang on, buddy," the teen whispered. Opening the kit with shaking hands, he cleaned the blood around the torn vest, wincing each time the dog whimpered. I know. I'm trying," he murmured. He wrapped gauze around the dog's wound as best as he could, though the freezing wind made his fingers stiff and clumsy. Still, the dog didn't snap or pull away. Instead, it rested its head gently against the boy's knee, trusting him completely. Just as he tightened the bandage, sirens wailed in the distance. The teen froze. Moments later, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing through the storm. Officers jumped out, hands moving to their holsters. "That's him," one shouted. "The missing K9 Shadow." The teen's heart pounded. Before he could explain, an officer stepped forward. "Kid, put your hands where I can see them. How did you get our dog?" I didn't hurt him." The teen stammered, lifting his hands. "I'm trying to help." Tension crackled in the air. Then, in a sudden weak movement, the injured shepherd pushed itself up just enough to press its head against the boy's leg, letting out a faint protective growl. The officers hesitated. Their loyal partner was defending the homeless kid. The officers exchanged stunned glances as the German shepherd's weak growl vibrated through the air. It wasn't aggressive, it was protective. The teen stayed frozen, his hands raised, snowflakes melting on his trembling fingers. One officer slowly approached, kneeling beside the dog. "Shadow?" "Buddy, it's me," he whispered. The dog's ears twitched, but his gaze stayed locked on the boy, refusing to move. The officer's eyes widened. He's guarding him. The tension shifted instantly. The officer stood and looked the teen in the eye. "All right, kid. What happened? How'd you find him?" The boy lowered his hands slowly, his voice barely more than a whisper. He was lying in an alley. Cold. Bleeding. I couldn't just leave him. Another officer noticed the bandages, messy but carefully wrapped. "You did this?" The boy nodded. "It was all I could do. I spent my last $5 to get supplies. I didn't want him to die." Silence hung heavy in the freezing air. The officers stared at him, their hard expressions softening. Shadow let out a faint whine, nudging the boy's hand as if confirming his story. One officer knelt beside them both, his breath forming white clouds. "You saved our partner's life," he said quietly. "And we misjudged you." The boy blinked, stunned. For the first time in a long time, someone finally believed him. The officers carefully lifted Shadow into the back of the cruiser, turning up the heat as the dog let out a weak sigh. "Get in," one of them said gently to the teen. The boy hesitated, unsure if he was even allowed, but Shadow's paw tapped weakly against the seat. It was enough. He climbed in beside the injured dog, resting a hand on its FURT. The precinct's small veterinary room. Medics rushed to work, cleaning the wounds, removing the damaged vest, and stabilizing Shadow. The teen waited outside, pacing nervously, his stomach twisting with fear. Minutes felt like hours until finally a vet stepped out with a tired smile. "He's going to make it," she said. "And honestly, only because you found him when you did." Relief washed over the teen, so hard his knees nearly buckled. The officers exchanged glances, then motioned him into a small office. "We ran your name," one said softly. "You're listed as a missing minor. No guardians. No address." The boy swallowed, bracing for the worst. But instead, the officer continued. "That ends today. You're not going back to the streets." They offered him food, warm clothes, and a temporary room at the precinct. Days later, the captain approached him with an unexpected offer. "A spot in our Youth K9 training program, if you want it." Shadow, now recovering, limped forward and nudged the boy's hand. The teen smiled through tears. He had spent his last $5 and gained a partner, a family, and a future he never thought possible.